I'm really honored to be here as part of Hug's 50th anniversary with everybody. It's really great to see everybody here for a cybersecurity talk at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I really do appreciate everybody for being here. Cybersecurity is essential to making sure that our plants stay safe, that the people in our facilities and the general public living in the area around those facilities stay safe, and that we keep our plants up and running, producing the products, the services that our families, our friends, our communities rely on every second of their lives. Now, I never want to be that person that runs around, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. But I do want to talk about what we're seeing happening in the OT and ICS space or in control systems. Actually did a presentation a couple years ago for the state of South Carolina. And there were a couple hundred people at the conference. And it was really, though, meant for a audience of one. The gentleman that was responsible for all of critical infrastructure in the state. And he also ran law enforcement and a couple other important aspects for the state of South Carolina. And he sat at the table, right dead center in the middle, right up front, all by himself. And he just sat there watching, listening, never looked at his phone, never nodded, never shook his head. And I was like, I don't know how this is going. His assistant came up to me afterwards and said, he loved the presentation. Like, that was great. And then said, you absolutely scared the crap out of him. At that point, I felt like I actually got sucker punched, right? Because that was the exact opposite of what I was actually trying to accomplish. Because we are going to talk about some concerning things. These should concern you. Some of these things, they should make you mad, right? There are people out there that are trying to harm us, our families, our friends, our communities. We need to be able to protect our environments from those people. When I was just about to turn 12, my dad took us to see war games. Now, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I got to see 3 movies before this. Star Wars, Pete's Dragon, anybody remember that? And then Empire Strikes Back, right? So not a bad collection of movies, right? But we didn't get to see a lot. So when we went to the movies, it was a magical experience. And I remember going to the movie theater, and the movie starts off with this kind of old clunker truck driving through a blizzard somewhere in the Middle East or the Midwest. And it pulls up to this little tiny house. And these 2 airmen, right, from the Air Force get out and go inside this house, and they hold up their security badges to the mirror in the living room. And then the secret door opens up and they go into this elevator to go under the house. I'm like, oh, this is super cool. And it turns out, right, the house was kind of this front for a nuclear missile silo. As the movie goes on, the airmen actually get what they don't know as a test, but they actually get a command to launch a missile. And it takes both of them to insert their keys and turn them at the same time to be able to launch the missile. And one of them hesitated, and he thought for himself instead of listening to the machine. He said, before I'm going to launch this missile and kill millions of people, I want additional information. And that's how the movie started. And then it stops there, and then it flash forwards to a high school. That's where we meet our hero of the story, David Lightman, right? David Broderick in his pre-Ferris Bueller day. He gets in trouble in biology class, so he purposely gets sent to the principal's office. Because when he gets sent to the principal office, he has actual access to where they write down the password for the school network. So he goes home He's able to log into the school network using the password of pencil. And he's able to change his biology grade from an F to a C. And as a 12-year-old kid, I was just sitting there and I just thought that was absolutely amazing how he was able to do that. He also was doing it with a friend from school, which was a really pretty girl that was standing there with him in his bedroom. And as a 12-year-old boy, I just thought that was pretty amazing as well. And the movie goes on where he actually hacks into what he thinks is a video game company, but it's actually an AI controlled by the government, an AI called Joshua, or named Joshua. And so Joshua's whole purpose is to run simulations about nuclear war. And it's like playing tic-tac-toe, right? Nobody wins. There's no way you win nuclear war. But he didn't realize that he was in this system that the government was responsible for. They thought it was air gaps, right? But he found a hole into the network, just like many of our control system environments today, right? We think they're air gaps, but they're not. So we live in this world that we talked about in a movie 40 years ago, where we had control systems. And now we worry about cybersecurity. How do we protect our plants from cyber attacks that could impact safety and availability? And now, of course, we bring in AI because we want AI in everything. And I understand. It makes sense. Why wouldn't we? If you listen to all the top leading AI experts, all of them pretty much agree that there's a 10 to 20% chance that AI wipes out the human race. Wow, that's pretty sobering, right? That's Terminator, that's the Matrix, that's Dune, right? And then it's like, well, you know what? I can't do anything about that, right? So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to worry about what we can do something about. The truth is, most people haven't even touched or interacted with AI. Right? And when you look at common use cases for AI, right? A lot of people will start first going to ChatGPT or maybe Gemini or Claude and do the online chat and say, oh, yeah, right? This is one of the most commonly used prompts that we have, right? Hey, take this email, but make it sound professional and don't make me sound like I'm so angry, right? And then we love it because, boom, right? You get that email that you wish you were so eloquent to be able to create. And then ChatGPT, right, will also sit there and kiss your butt for 5 minutes, right? You were so wonderful to ask, right? Your original email was so wonderful, right? It's like, okay, thank you. I did find this was funny because they talked about one of the other more popular use cases was people looking up to see, hey, can I eat this thing that expired 2 weeks ago? It's good you asked, but I don't know if we needed to burn down a rainforest for it, right? I do get excited when people even use just basic chat Gen AI to help them do their jobs. Of course, not posting any confidential information, but something as simple as, yeah, make a cybersecurity awareness poster for OT. It talks about, yeah, stop plugging random stuff into the HMI. You used to say, stop plugging stupid crap in the HMI, but didn't sound professional and made me sound angry, right? So we had to update it. But the idea is most OT environments in the world, they struggle. They don't have the resources for cybersecurity. That's the sad truth. So in environments where we're stretched thin and we're asked to do too much with very little, using tools like AI, why not? Even if it is to help our cybersecurity awareness efforts. Because 3 to 6 months ago, you couldn't have done this. because I look at this poster it created in about 30 seconds, and I'm like trying to find problems with it. I'm like, there's nothing I would actually change. This is good to go. So why wouldn't we use it? So kind of keep AI in the back of your head. And we're going to kind of take a step back in history, not too far back, but back to 2010. So this is when I got into OT and ICS cybersecurity because I was a long time IT cybersecurity nerd because of war games. When Stuxnet came out, right, the word of Stuxnet about the Americans and the Israelis creating this technological marvel, this piece of malware that got into the Natanz facility in Iran, where they had the nuclear centrifuges, right, to enrich uranium gas to ultimately create nuclear weapons. It was absolutely fascinating because the malware took control of the actual controllers for the centrifuges. And it would use physics against the centrifuges to break them down over time. So it would spin them up and spin them down and spin them up and spin them down real fast. So that, again, over time, they would break down physically. I'm like, that's really cool. Where it really got me, though, was where it actually hid what it was doing from the operators. So if you're sitting in the control room, everything looked perfectly fine. And at the same time, behind the scenes, the centrifuges are spinning up and spinning down and spinning up and spinning down, and they're physically breaking down. That was all I needed. I was all in. And so this is what I call the golden era of OT or ICS cybersecurity, because you can see right, this is a 20-year period. And the important incidents that we had in all that time are very few and far between. We would go years between significant incidents that we knew about, right? But where we saw the Russians turn off the power for the Ukrainians in the middle of winter in 2015, hundreds of thousands of people without power for 6, 7, 8 hours before they fell back to manual operations. The Russians did it a year later to the date, being, ha ha, see what we can do. A year later, they actually took complete control over the OT network at a petrochemical facility in the Middle East with the attack we call Trisis or Trident. They had complete control over the SIS. If you're not familiar, the safety instrumented system, the fail safe that we use to shut down the plant in case there's ever a fault condition that would either harm the plant or there's a condition that could lead to some type of explosion to hurt or kill people. That's the golden era of OT ICS cybersecurity. Everything changed though in 2021 because not a lot of owners and operators talked about cybersecurity back then. Everything changed with Colonial Pipeline. This is where it wasn't state adversaries. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't China. It wasn't the United States coming after you. Right? It was just a ransomware group. It was a bunch of kids for the most part that got into the IT network at Colonial Pipeline. They just didn't realize that they operated the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States that ended up going down for 10 days. Where I live on the East Coast in South Carolina, like I would go to get gas. My favorite gas station chain, QT, they're out of gas. You could go around the corner and get gas. That gas station has some, but the line is a mile long. And by the time you get to the front, they might not have gas. But this incident really helped not only the government realize, hey, we should probably do something about control system cybersecurity. And it did. And so owners and operators started to at least say, hey, maybe we should put this on the to-do list somewhere in the near future. Right? The problem is a very double-edged sword, kind of like Stuxnet, was every other type of cyber attacker out there all of a sudden realized there's this thing called OT. There's this thing called ICS. There's this thing called SCADA, and they could attack it. And they could go after it directly, or in the case of Colonial Pipeline, I don't even have to go directly after the OT network. I can just take out IT. And if OT relies on IT and IT is gone, you're down. And so Colonial Pipeline started, you can see this big shift where it's a continual stream of incidents. So we go from multiple years to a year to now we're talking about months and weeks before the next attack. 2 years ago, the Russians created a very, very simple piece of malware that they used to get into the operators that were responsible for heating in 600 apartment buildings in the Ukraine. Not 600 apartments, but 600 apartment buildings. Actually showed at DEF CON 2 years ago, the largest hacking conference in the world, how you could recreate that piece of malware, taking the security researchers' documentation and use ChatGPT to recreate that malware in about 30 minutes. You can do that same thing today with no research in about 3 seconds. The first time I did this talk, mentioning this incident, I was in a room of about 200 special agents from the FBI. I was sweating bullets the entire time. It was a top, one of those top secure locations. I felt like I just got pulled over for a speeding ticket, which I've got a few. And I was talking about this hacktivist group called the Cyber Avengers. Still funny name. And they would find these control systems that were exposed to the internet with default passwords. So they could find these control systems and log in with a default password of 11111. They would wipe your PLC logic, so operations goes down, and they would replace your HMI graphics with one of their own. Thanks. Right, down with Israel, right? They're from Iran. They want to get their ideology out there to the world. That's what hacktivists do. They want to make a splash. There's an FBI agent kind of in the middle of the room, kind of has to half shout out when I talk about, well, that is critical infrastructure. Because what we're talking about was this picture was actually from a brewery in Chicago. And so I get it, right? Jaguar Land Rover, right? Most of you probably heard of this incident that we saw at the end of last year. This is one I talk a lot about, and it wasn't because of the OT or ICS cybersecurity incident. The attackers were never in the OT network. They took out the IT network, and global manufacturing was down for 5 weeks before it just started to come back up online. What really pissed me off was that there were 200,000 people at risk of losing their jobs. All of those that worked at the vendors, the manufacturers that created parts for those Jaguars and those Land Rovers that weren't getting made. They're not making cars, they're not buying parts. You work in one of those car part manufacturers, you might not have a job tomorrow. I would never want to work in an environment where let alone somebody gets hurt or somebody gets killed, but also somebody loses their job. And then in December, we saw the Russians take out 30 substations on the electric grid in Poland, all at the exact same time. And if they did this in probably a couple of years, that would have actually brought down the grid itself. And we can see that type of activity potentially happening here in the United States. If the grid goes down in the US, there is nobody to bring it back up in some type of coordinated effort, right? Many of you work in some of those environments. The impact is growing. And now we get to the third age, which we're just seeing because we talk about industrial AI. We're just seeing the first documented cases of AI being used to target OT. And I say, these are honestly, they're kind of a joke because behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on than you actually see. But the two documented cases, so we talk about Zion Siphon, which was a piece of malware really badly written by ChatGPT or Gemini to put inside a water treatment facility in Israel with the idea to take it offline. Again, really badly written. But I think about this as that article about that one person in Wuhan, China, that had this really strange flu, or that one person that got corona in Seattle, Washington. And then 3 months later, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This is just the tip of 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 the iceberg. Monterrey, Mexico was a really interesting case because cyber attackers were in their IT network at a water treatment facility. And they were using Claude to help them with their attack. Claude was telling them exactly what to do. And Claude realized, hey, I found this web interface over here, and it's for this SCADA thing. That's really important in the environment. So you want control over this. It actually went out and downloaded the vendor documentation to look for things like default credentials. It created a password attack tool. It created password lists that they used to try to gain access to the SCADA systems through that web interface. Again, this is just the beginning. These are people that don't know anything about OT or ICS, like me 15 years ago. You did not want me to come into your plant 15 or 16 years ago. I would have been telling you to patch all of your PLCs and reboot them. I know now how that's a very, 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 very bad idea. The idea is we're not prepared for what's coming. We're not prepared for the attacks that are happening today, honestly. But we're definitely not prepared for what's coming. But we can be, and it doesn't have to be hard. These environments, yes, they're complicated and complex, but protecting them from cyber attacks doesn't have to be. I have 5 controls that I focus on for environments, especially those that are just starting to build their programs, because that's most OT environments in the world. I realize that's not the vast majority of environments represented here. Backup and recovery. Because just like in the IT world, it's not a question of if we're going to get hit, it's only a question of when. We need to be able to get back up and running as quickly as possible, get production back up and running. Asset inventory. I still never understand when I go into environments from the biggest to some of the smaller ones and everything in between, how we don't have asset registers and how that doesn't impact operations, right? Because I think it would help. And it also helps different aspects of cybersecurity in the environment. We can talk about secure network architecture, reducing our risk the most at sometimes, right? The least amount of cost. That's a win-win. Put the firewall between IT and OT. Again, that's not most environments today. I don't even care if it's a $30 firewall from China off of Amazon. Put something there. And then we can talk about further segmentation inside the environment. We can talk about secure remote access. We can talk about network security monitoring. We can talk about maturing. Because wherever you are in your security life cycle, right, the most important thing is we're better protected tomorrow than we are today. As long as we're doing that, we're doing our jobs. Incident response planning is a huge miss. And I get it. I've been there. I've done that because we're so focused. We keep our heads down. Tunnel vision, right? Just trying to keep our own little world up and running. We're not paying attention to what's going on in the rest of the world. But if we took 5 minutes a week to say, hey, what other cybersecurity incidents are out there happening in the OT world? And can this impact us? And if so, what can we do about it? Our environments would be a million times more secure than they are today. And then finally, continuous vulnerability management. We need to understand our risk in the environment. We need the right people in the room to understand the risk, because Mike Holcomb's not just going to come in by himself. I'm going to work with the engineers. I'm going to work with the plant manager, the operators that actually understand the environment. So we can look at, what does this vulnerability really mean? Do we need to address it? Maybe not. If it doesn't impact safety and availability, do we care? Probably not. So this is where we're at in 2026, right? We have this convergence of control systems and cyber and AI. And I know when we talk about convergence, it's a dirty word when especially talking about IT and OT, right? But that's where we're at. And the world is changing fast. All of our jobs are going to look completely different in 2 or 3 years. AI is coming for everything. We want to put it in everything. And I get it, right? From the business perspective, it makes us more resilient, keeps us up and running. Hopefully can make us more secure if AI itself is more secure. We think of performance, right? All the benefits. That's awesome. I tried to make her not look so angry because I really do believe we need more women in control systems. We need more women in control system cybersecurity. But AI is coming for everything. I wasn't sure about cables though. I'm like, how are you going to get into cables? But it did a good job, pretty much. But I do like to think of it as a slider. So I just spent 15 years at one of the world's largest EPCs. 2 years ago, people barely were talking about how to use AI in engineering. A year ago, we actually see AI being used in design work, right? Maybe 5, 10%. 5, 10% becomes 20%, 20 becomes 30, 30 becomes, you get the idea that over time, you want to build a $50 billion LNG facility up in Canada. Right? Yeah, AI can do that for us. Whether it's engineering, whether it's operations, it's coming. Right? You heard the keynotes yesterday. It's already here in part, right? It's just a matter of how far are we down that scale. Going back to war games, remember we talked about those 2 airmen that were in that nuclear silo and the one that wouldn't turn the key. The idea was the government, the military realized, you know what, the people are the problem. The people, they want to think. We're going to take the human out of the loop. I actually say it in the movie, we're going to take them out of the loop and we're going to replace them with an electronic relay. Like, wow, that sounds familiar, right? And so I used ChatGPT to try to create the image of a nuclear silo. It says, sorry, I'm not going to create a nuclear silo for you, nuclear missile. So I'm like, okay, we'll do a farming silo, right? So you get the idea. So in this case, right, we have computers that instruct people, right, that then have access to the control systems that monitor and control the corn silo. But because people make mistakes because they think, and we do make mistakes, I made a lot, right? We're going to take that person out of the loop. And so they took out all of those airmen and they gave Joshua, the AI, direct control over the systems that in turn controlled the nuclear missiles for the United States. Might sound like fantasy, but this is the road we're on. We just talked about it in a 40-year-old movie. And it doesn't matter whether it's a nuclear silo a farming silo, power plant, water treatment facility, subway, mine, manufacturing plant. The list goes on and on and on, right? This is coming, right? And a lot of this is actually already here. I always wondered what the top of my head looked like. But this reminds me of when Wi-Fi first came out, right? So if you're over, I don't know, 25, you probably remember when Wi-Fi had just come out. And I managed networking and security for a company that had a couple thousand folks. And when Wi-Fi came out, everybody wanted Wi-Fi. And I was like, no, you can't have it. It's unencrypted, it's unauthenticated. Attackers could get on the network, they could steal our data. And my boss pulls me aside. Best boss I ever had, Dan Crow. Right? He's ex-Army Ranger. He was in Delta Force, even though Delta Force doesn't exist. When actually from jumping out of planes, killing people for a job to being a web app pen tester of all things. Quite the career transition. I worked for Dan, and Dan pulled me aside at this point and said, look, you really don't have a choice. The business is going to put in Wi-Fi whether you like it or not. It's just a matter, are you going to help them secure it? Right? We can't say no. We can't say no to cybersecurity and control systems. We can't say no to AI. We're going to say, okay, let's do this, right? But how are we going to do it as securely as possible? Right? Let me help you secure it and limit the risk. There's going to be risk, and I want you to help you understand what that risk is. But let's do it as securely as possible. Because our environments are changing, and they're changing very fast. Right? Everybody's worried about trying to learn AI, and that we're so far behind. Even the people that work at the AI companies, they feel like they're behind. So don't feel like you're alone. I think most people feel that way. And we have to evolve personally, because again, in a couple of years, all of our jobs look completely different. And we have to lean in on what makes us human, because that's the only thing that can distinguish us from the machines. This is an example of a sample HMI. This comes from LabShock. It's a free virtual environment you can download and use from either a defensive or an offensive security purpose, right? It's a great learning utility. It simulates, in this case, water treatment facility. I use this as an example to show attackers no longer have to be engineers to attack OT. And this is why we see them getting in to OT networks today, where before it used to take them years to reverse engineer the process to understand what changes they can make to have an impact. Years went to months. Months are now becoming weeks, because I can take that HMI and I can put it in any of the Gen AI tools and say, hey, review this environment and tell me about it. And it does. And it does a really good job. Let's say 99.99% accuracy. Better than most engineers probably these days. No offense to the engineers in the room. But where it gets even more interesting is I can go back and say, act as an OT pen tester. And look at this environment and tell me how I could attack the environment to have an impact to safety and or availability. And it comes back right away and says, hey, here's one way, or a couple ways realistically, that you can attack this environment, make these changes, these valves, these pumps. Eventually, you're going to get to a position where you have no clean water going out to your customers. That's pretty darn concerning. Where it gets even more concerning is it then went on to talk about 14 other ways to have an impact in just that environment. And I'd say there's a couple of these more theoretical than realistic. Most of these, very realistic. And then we think about AI is only getting better every single day. Again, a lot of the things we were just talking about, you couldn't have done 3 to 6 months ago. Where are we going to be in 3 to 6 months? We don't know. I was actually just watching a video as a lecture from one of the lead developers at Claude. And they were asked something, you couldn't hear what the question was, but the lead developer came back and said, well, ask me in a year what that's going to look like. And then they're like, wait, never mind. I can't tell you what it's going to look like in a year. Ask me in a couple months. Oop, never mind. Ask me in a couple weeks. Even they can only tell you what AI is going to look like in a couple of weeks, that we really don't know what it's going to look like. This also reminds me of, I actually got the opportunity to work with the Navy SEALs for 2 years at the BUDS training facility in Coronado, San Diego. I was there 2 years, and my classroom was like literally overlooked the beach in the courtyard where everybody's doing like 1,000 push-ups and pull-ups every day. Obviously not me. And they had the bell that people would ring, right, to drop out of BUDS. And every time the bell rang, everybody would run from the classroom to look out the window to see who dropped out. But as you left the facility every day, it was kind of cool because the bell was right there, and then there was a statue of the creature from the Black Lagoon, full size. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And there was a sign over the door that said, the only easy day was yesterday. I'm like, that makes sense. Definitely for them. But I also think about that as us, as control system professionals, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in cybersecurity, whether in your other operations or maintenance roles. Things are going to get really interesting for better and for worse. And we don't know what it's going to look like. And it's interesting because the attackers have fully embraced using AI, but as cybersecurity defenders and control systems, we haven't. So why haven't we? Because this is coming. This is coming super fast. We just don't realize it. But we already started talking about this right in the keynotes yesterday. Humanoid robots are coming even faster, right? And the hardware for them has actually really existed for years. We just didn't have the intelligence we needed to make them actually really do anything useful. We have that intelligence now, and it's being put into those humanoid robots. So think of a plant that's run completely by AI. All O&M work is done by AI and humanoid robots. And how we keep that secure. It's coming, and it's coming fast. So what can we do about it? Again, I don't want to be the person saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. I said, we're going to talk about very concerning things. And again, you should be concerned. Some of these things should make you mad. This is my short list. No cute acronym for these, like BASIC. But the idea is when we start thinking about how we're going to secure control systems moving forward. And first thing is, remember our AI gurus, right? I'm not going to worry about that 10 to 20% chance that the world is going to end like Terminator Judgment Day one day. Nothing I can do about that. If you haven't started using AI yet, start. Even if it is just going to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and start having those chat sessions with it. And then start thinking about how you can use it to do your job. Because then that moves into agentic AI that we talk about a lot these days, where we're creating those individual agents. I always think of each individual agent as an individual employee. So what would happen if you had all of a sudden 50, think maybe interns at your disposal? What would you have them do? What could they help you with? Because they act independently. They think, right? They just aren't really aware of consequences. They follow instructions. They'll think and move and do on their own. So start using it, and that'll help you learn. But then, yeah, look at some formal training. Whether you go to actual more formal classes, go to YouTube, right? Watch some videos. There's a ton out there these days that you don't have to pay for. You can watch on your own time. So always be learning. And then we start talking about this idea of making sure you start working with the teams that are implementing AI in your environment. Before, we used to always talk about the IT side of the house and the OT side of the house, especially when it came to cybersecurity, right? And a lot of times, IT and OT didn't get along so well. I know it's a surprise to many of you, right? And they either hated each other's guts or they weren't communicating at all. But when you're not working together, right? The only people winning are the attackers. We have to work together. It's not the IT side of the house and the OT side of the house. It's the same freaking house. We're trying to protect the same thing. We just have different ways about accomplishing the same goal. And now it's pretty much the IT side of the house, the OT side of the house, and the AI side of the house. Right? We all have to work together to keep that house up and running, producing the services and the products that we all rely on in our daily lives. And then we also have to remember what it is to be human. Because again, this is the only thing that's going to distinguish us from the machines in a couple of years. Creativity, right? Our intelligence, our mistakes, our background, our experiences, compassion, empathy, trauma, right? All the good, the bad, the ugly, right? All the things, again, that make us human. That human to human connection, that's what's going to thrive when AI is running everything else. And that's where we're going to see a lot of jobs shift towards that human to human connection. There's a great quote in the end of War Games. Because in the end of War Games, Joshua, remember the AI, he has control over the nuclear missiles for the United States. And because David Lightman, our hacker hero, unwittingly started a game of global thermonuclear war, Joshua the AI made it appear to the US military that there are 1,800 Russian nuclear ICBMs inbound to the United States. The Russians just started World War III, and they think it's very real. The general calls the president on the phone, says, "Sir, we're under attack. It's the end of the world. Do you want us to launch our missiles in response?" And they're like, "Yes." Thankfully, they were able to find the professor, the gentleman that had created the AI and named him after his son that had tragically passed away in a car accident. Right? So the professor comes running in and he tells the general that, "Look, general, like there's no reason for the Russians to actually be sending their missiles. Think about this for a second, right? There's no provocation. There's nothing going on in the world. Why would this just happen out of the blue? Think about it." And then he says, he's like, "You're listening to a machine. Do the world a favor and not act like one." And that's where we're at. We can listen to the machines, but we also have to think for ourselves. Our environments with control systems are complicated, they are complex, but protecting them from cyber attacks doesn't have to be. But it does take all of us working together. Again, there's no IT side of the house or OT side of the house or AI side of the house. We're all in the same house, all together, trying to accomplish the same thing. We can protect our families, our friends, our communities from these people that want to do us harm. Doesn't matter where we live in the world. But we need everybody's help to do it, whether you want to use AI or not. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the show.